Welcome to today's writing lesson. Today we're going to learn about how to open a story, and you're going to write the best story ever. So our learning intentions, we're learning how to write the opening to a story. Our success criteria: I can achieve shop in my writing. So remember, that is what should be considered and included in every piece of writing, and I'm going to go over that in a moment. I can use adjectives to describe the setting and character. So both of these should definitely be considered in your writing when you're assessing your writing piece. A step up from that is to be able to vary your sentence openers to make your story more exciting. And a chilly challenge is to use the power of three or similes to describe the setting or character. So, what is the point in learning how to write a good opening to a story? Pause this video now and have a little think. Well, good story openings make us want more information. A strong story opening immediately makes you want to know more. So think of the story, the last novel you read. Did you want to keep reading it, or did you get fed up? Now, it's likely that if you started the story and you wanted to keep reading, it's because it had a really good opening and it had lured you in. Whereas if it was quite a boring opening, you might not be so keen to keep reading. It also widens your vocabulary through the use of adjectives and openers. So let's just do a little recap of what we should always have in every piece of writing. We should be spelling our words correctly, so that's considering all the phonemes you've learned. So when there's a word and you think, oh, I'm not quite sure how to spell this again, think about the sounds in the words and which phonemes should be in them. If it's a tricky word, think about the strategies you've learned to spell tricky words and see if you can figure it out. And if you really don't know, then use a dictionary. Handwriting. Now, I would advise that you put pencil to paper for this piece of writing, just so that you're not getting too reliant on using a computer, because when we go back to school you're obviously going to be using a lot more paper and pencil. So when you're writing your story, we're not writing a lot today, so take your time, think about your size, think about your joins, and make sure it's on the line. Order. We don't want a story that doesn't make any sense. Each sentence after each other should be logical, which means that they should go together. You wouldn't be introducing a character and then suddenly talking about Christmas when the story has nothing to do with Christmas. So it's about making sure that the sequence of the story flows and makes sense. And lastly, punctuation. So we've done lots on punctuation recently. So remember, capital letters start of sentences and for proper nouns. Full stops at the end of sentences. You will be able to figure out where to put a full stop by thinking about how many connectives you have, how long the sentence is. And also you can use, if it's a question you've put in there, then put a question mark. If there's speech, you now know how to use speech marks. Or if you're a bit unsure, just give it a go. And then also exclamation marks to emphasise or if somebody's shouting. So let's begin with our story openings. There are different ways in which you can begin a story. Now today we're going to be focusing on describing a character and describing the setting. But there are two other ways you can begin a story that you may have found in your own novels. So some stories begin with an action scene, and some stories begin with dialogue. But today we're just going to focus on describing a character and describing the setting. So I'm going to read you this opening, and first of all I want you to think about what story it's from, and then I also want you to think about which words are showing description, making it a really good opening of the setting. The hottest day of the summer so far was drawing to a close, and a drowsy silence lay over the large square houses of Privet Drive. So pause this video now and think about which novel do you think this is, And where is the description? So it was Harry Potter and the Order of Phoenix. Well done if you got that. Privet Drive was probably the clue there. And the description, well, they said it was the hottest day. So we can imagine what the day was like. And they described it as drawing a close and a drowsy silence. So we can imagine what it sounds like. Lay over the large square houses. So now we can picture the houses. So this was really clever of J.K. Rowling because it meant that as the reader, we could almost like imagine ourselves there. If you think back to the visualization lesson we did last week, you can visualize that street. So when you're describing a setting, we use our 5 senses, which remember is our sight, our hearing, our touch, our taste, and your smell. Now you don't have to use all 5 in a paragraph where you're describing the setting, but you can use 1 or 2 throughout. Now I have put up some vocabulary maps to help you with words if you're struggling to think of description words. Now there's lots here, so I've cut it in half on that so that you're not overwhelmed with all the words. But this is just to give you an idea of, look at all the words we can use to describe what things look like. Bustling, cluttered, crowded, dazzling, dusty, empty, enormous, grim. The sounds, banging, buzzing, gurgling, howling, loud. Smells, it smells clean, it smells damp, it smells dusty, it smells exotic, it smells floral. Sensations, bumpy, gentle, hard, itchy, jaggy. And feelings, amazed, anxious, calm, curious. So it's really important that you use some of these, and you can just steal these from this sheet. You can literally just steal them because that will help up level your writing. So let's have a look at this one. You should recognise this book pretty quickly. This is describing the character. So I'm going to read it to you, and then I want you to pause the video and first of all think about what book it is, and then also think about where the description is in the sentence, these sentences. Mr. Twit was one of these very hairy-faced men. The whole of his face, except for his forehead, his eyes, and his nose, was covered with thick hair. He felt wise and grand, but he was lazy and fat. So yes, it was the Twits. And look how much description is there. I've almost highlighted the whole bit. Very hairy-faced. The whole of his face, except for his forehead, his eyes, his nose, was covered with thick hair. He felt wise and grand, but was lazy and fat. So that description tells us what he looks like, and also a bit about his personality. Now, if the author, Roald Dahl, had just written Mr. Twit was hairy, and he was lazy, that'd be very boring. But he's put extra detail for us to emphasise how hairy he is, and for us to really build up a picture in our heads of what he looks like. So if you're describing the character, we want to know what the character looks like. So use adjectives to describe their size, their shape, their physical features, what they're wearing, the colours. We want to know what their personality is like. Are they friendly? Are they shy? Are they mean? Are they nasty? Are they spoiled? And we can get an idea of what the character is going to be like throughout the story through this description. So again, this is another sheet that I've put on the help sheet to help you think of adjectives to describe character and personality. So your character might be hardworking, they might be friendly, they might be loving, they might be scared, they might be confident, they might be kind, they might be sociable, they might be gentle. So when you're describing, remember a few lessons ago I talked about the power of 3. And just like having a team of 3 rather than one person, 3 adjectives in a sentence is a lot more powerful than 1. If you just have one person doing a task, it's nowhere near as powerful as having 3. And it's the same when it comes to description. So I could say he was brave. Or I could say he was strong, brave and indestructible. It's a much more powerful sentence, and as a reader, you'd much rather read that. Similes. Similes are a fantastic way to emphasise what the setting looks like or a character's personality. So I could describe this setting as the valley had deep hollows. Or I could say, the valley was as deep as an underground tunnel. I went up and down it like a spiralling roller coaster. So I've made two comparisons there that are both similes. Remember, with similes, we compare it to something by saying it was as something, or we say it's like a. And that really builds a picture of the setting. So here are another help mat I've also uploaded to help you think of similes. So you can say something is as soft as a blanket, as hot as the sun, as hungry as a hippo. So you can take these and make them your own. So remember, our success criteria is to be able to use adjectives to describe the setting and character. And if you want to challenge yourself, you can use the power of three or similes to describe the character. Now, I'm going to introduce you to the character that you're going to write a story about, and I'm quite excited about this. Are you ready? This is Fuzzle. Now, Fuzzle is the character you're going to write a story about today. So just now, I want you to get pencil and paper, and I want you to write a sentence. This is the opening to your story. You are actually starting your story now. By the end of this video, you will have finished it. So I want you to either, you can just use choose the green option or the chili challenge, and describe Fuzzle. Pause this video now and write a couple of sentences to open your story where you are describing Fuzzle. So here is my description. I went for the chili challenge. So Fuzzle was like a fluffy blanket. There's my simile. With teeny hands, an elephant-like nose. Another simile. And he had 5 humps with many versions of him. He was a shy, caring, kind soul. So there's my power of 3. I've got 3 adjectives in one sentence. So that is the opening to my story, and I can't wait to hear yours. Let's move on to the setting. So again, you can use adjectives to describe the setting and character, or you can choose a chili challenge and use the power of 3 or similes. This is where Fuzzle lives, and you're now going to write 2 or more sentences to describe where he lives. Pause this video now and write those sentences, and just add them onto the sentences that you wrote about Fuzzle. So I said he enjoyed cycling around Fruit City. I've decided that's what it's called. Fruit City was full of twisting, winding, deserted roads. There's my power of 3. The grass was as green as algae, and the tall buildings shot into the sky. So as green as algae is a simile, and the tall buildings shot into the sky, that's actually more a metaphor because they're not actually shooting into the sky, but it emphasises how tall they are. So here's my story so far. And you should have yours so far, but you've got the description of Fuzzle and the description of where he lives. Fuzzle was like a fluffy blanket with teeny hands and an elephant-like nose, and he had 5 humps with many versions of him. He was a shy, caring, kind soul. He enjoyed cycling around Fruit City. Fruit City was full of twisting, winding, deserted roads. The grass was as green as algae, and the tall buildings shot into the sky. We're now going to learn how to continue our story. So keep what you've got. You're literally just going to, you can take a new paragraph, so a new line, or you can continue from the sentence you've just finished. And we're going to vary our sentence openers to make our story more exciting. So it can be very boring if every sentence starts with the same. He was smart and he was clever. It was sunny and it was cool. He went to the shop. It was busy. So these sentences have only started with he and it. It's not very exciting, is it? So we're going to learn how to make our sentences more exciting by starting with something different each time. So we're going to learn how to open our sentences with an adverb. The next one's going to be opened with a verb. The next one's going to be opened with a simile or a metaphor. And the next one's going to be opened with a feeling. So remember, an adverb is describing how we're doing something. Okay? So astonishingly, the bus arrived on time. Unfortunately, I cannot make it to your party. Cautiously, she removed the bandage. So notice all these words end with ly. So you can choose one of these words to start the next sentence. You've described Fuzzle and you've described the setting. Your next sentence, you're going to start with one of these words. So sadly, crazily, disappointingly, regretfully, steadily, happily, slowly, mournfully, graciously. Please obviously only choose a word that you know the meaning of. And if you want to choose one of these words that you don't know the meaning of, why don't you look it up? So pause this video now and write your next sentence starting with an adverb. So my next sentence is happily. That's an adverb. Fuzzle was cycling through the winding streets on a warm, sunny Sunday morning. What was yours? Our next sentence, we're going to use a verb and an ing. So giggling and laughing, they ran to school. Waiting for the others, Jade stared up at the sky. So what's your next sentence going to start with? You could start with running, jumping, playing, singing, dancing, crying, fighting, racing. Write your next sentence now, starting with a verb with an ing. So I've added singing along to the whistling, his little humps made on his back. So singing along to the whistling, his little humps made on his back. What was yours? So we've only got 2 more sentences left to write, and then we've got our first opening to our opening to our first story. Use a simile or a metaphor. So we've already gone through this, okay? So remember, a simile is where you can say it's like something, or you could say it's as something. So like a mouse, he tiptoed through the house. Brave lions, they stepped into battle. So that's a metaphor because they're not actually brave lions, just emphasising how brave they are. As swift as a bird, she glided through the air. So open your next sentence with a simile or a metaphor about what's happening in your story. So I wrote, like a rabbit in the headlights, Fuzzle stopped all of a sudden as he pressed heavily on the brakes. What did you have? And our last sentence, we're going to start with using a feeling. So we know our emotion words really well from the Emotion Works Orange Clog. So lonely, she walked the corridor. Elated, he jumped for joy. Jealous, she tore up his clothes. Angry, they fought for hours. Now notice there's a comma after each one because you kind of pause after that word. So you could choose devastated, unhappy, delighted, furious, excited, sad, frightened. Write your sentence now. So I chose petrified. He looked ahead to the worst sight he had ever seen. So there's my opening to my story. I'm going to read it back to you and see what you think. And then I want you to read yours back to yourself and see if you are pleased with your story. Fuzzle was like a fluffy blanket with teeny hands and an elephant-like nose, and he had 5 humps with mini versions of him. He was a shy, caring, kind soul. He enjoyed cycling around Fruit City. Fruit City was full of twisting, winding, deserted roads. The grass was as green as algae, and the tall buildings shot into the sky. Happily, Fuzzle was cycling through the winding streets on a warm Sunday morning, singing along to the whistling his little humps made on his back. Like a rabbit in the headlights, Fuzzle stopped all of a sudden as he pressed heavily on the brakes. Petrified, he looked ahead to the worst sight he had ever seen. So, I hope you're pleased with your opening to your story. Now, you're finishing there because tomorrow we're going to write the climax. So remember, the opening of a story should normally have different sentence openers to keep the story exciting, information about the setting, where and when the story is set, with a little description about it using the 5 senses. Some characters should be introduced and described, looks and personality. And remember, the objective, so the point of your story, is to make the reader want to keep reading. So let's just go back through our learning intention and success criteria. So today we were learning how to I've not changed that. Today we were learning how to open a story. Our success criteria is to I can achieve shop in my writing. So that's your spelling, handwriting, order and punctuation. Did you manage to use adjectives to describe the setting and character? Did you open your story with an exciting opening that will interest the reader? And did you use a power of 3 or similes to describe the setting and character? I'm really looking forward to reading your stories and upload them now. Thank you very much.